right, welcome back to Off Topic. First time in a while that I get to spread my wings and go back with what originally brought me to the dance in the first place. Joining me right now, that's not Jose Padilla. Jose will be back with me later in the week. That is Rick Lachlan from the Nets Insider and the Nets Insider podcast, which we usually host together. But since I wanted to really get back on and get really back at it, wow, what a topic to jump back on. Kevin Durant, or should we call him Benedict Arnold himself, requests a trade from the Brooklyn Nets today. Rick, what's up, buddy?
Randy, I actually just woke up from a nap, so I'm not sure what you said. Kevin Durant was requesting a trade.
Yeah. So here's what happened. Okay, I was on my way home. I was in the car. I'm on the phone with you. We were talking about the book, the Nets history book, which is available right now at BarnesandNobles.com. We'll shamelessly plug that in a few minutes that Rick wrote and I contributed with. So with that being said, all of a sudden, while I'm scrolling through Twitter while I'm driving, which by the way I don't recommend anybody do, all of a sudden I see a report from Woj that Kevin Durant and the Nets are working on a sign and trade together to move Kevin Durant. Now, let us go back a few days ago. We were all wondering what Kyrie Irving was doing. Now, let's go back even further, Rick. Let's go back to April when the Nets got swept by the Boston Celtics. In their post-game press conference, both Kyrie and Kevin Durant sat there on the podium and making the insinuations that the Nets is their team and they're going to work together to figure out what the next step is for this franchise. They said they were going to work with ownership. They were going to work with Sean Marks. They were going to work with the organization to help improve so this team could go compete for a championship. Fast forward, we knew the Kyrie Irving situation was going to have to work itself out, whether he was going to stay, whether he was going to go, whether he was going to go to free agency, whether he was going to do a sign and trade, where he's going to end up in the Lakers. All this stuff we knew what was going on. And then out of the blue today, Kevin Durant wants out. Now, my question to you, is this a giant FU to Kyrie saying you've been doing all this nonsense and now you're going to be here? Well, I can't, we're supposed to be friends and you're doing all this stuff. Or is this Kevin Durant flipping back off at the Nets organization? What? I just Rick, help me understand what's going on here.
Randy, I think you're teasing my next book that I'm going to have to write about what went on behind the scenes here with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant and Joe Tsai. Look, I want to bring this all the way back. I know you said you were bringing this back a few days ago. I want to bring this back to 3 years ago to today, June 30th, 2019. That same reporter, Adrian Wojnarowski, reported the Nets are making a clean sweep. And that was, of course, what the ultimate sign and trade would wound up with Kevin Durant trading for and signing Kyrie Irving, and then also along with that DeAndre Jordan. That was the clean sweep. How ironic. Here we are 3 years later after Sean Marks and Joe Tsai did a deal with the devil. And I will say the devil at the time was Kyrie Irving, because let's face it, you kind of knew all along this was going to be a package deal. And I love Bill Ingram, your fellow co-host. I respect his opinion, but one of the things we differed on and was trading Kyrie Irving, because I knew this was not only a distinct possibility, but a strong likelihood if the Nets in any way stood up to Kyrie Irving, like they did with basically not giving him a max contract during these last 48 to 72 hours, whether it was the vaccine mandate initially, he can play, and then he goes to part-time. He couldn't play, then he goes to part-time, and then, of course, the mandate's lifted. Everything that Sean Marks has done, and I'm not going to absolve him from blame, because when you have something like this of two players the caliber of Kevin Durant, and let's face it, Kyrie Irving has likely played his last game as a Net, when you see both of them going to be shipped out the door, that's a catastrophic failure from top to bottom. But what I won't blame Sean Marks for, and I will not blame Joe Tsai for, is having the two of them dictate to them what moves to make, whether it's trading all those picks of the Rockets for James Harden. Let's see how that worked out. Whether it was now trying to get Kyrie a max deal when he was basically showing up whenever he pleased last season. Obviously, the mandate was a part of that. But still, the Nets basically dug their feet in. They drew a line in the sand. They tried it Kevin Durant and Kyrie's way. They tried it building and bringing in the pieces they wanted. They tried it by caving into all of their demands, and it didn't work. They didn't deliver a championship. You want to argue Kevin Durant maybe wears a size 15 instead of a size 17 or 18. It could have been a different story. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, Randy just wrote this book about a 55-plus year history of the team. And of course, we know they have 2 ABA championships, 2 NBA championships appearances, no titles in the NBA. This team, being the Nets, will be in existence far after Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving retire, and they've been here well before they even arrive. So no one player, no 2 players are bigger than the organization. And that, at the end of the day, was the message that Sean Marks and Joe Tsai sent to the rest of the fan base. And frankly, they're now paying the piper for doing a deal with the devil.
Well, and it's funny too. You say that doing the deal with the devil, and that's exactly right. Because if you just like we were discussing during that post-game press conference, you sort of felt that those 2 guys were trying to run the show. They were trying to do it their way. They were trying to do it with a coach that didn't hold them responsible. And as soon as they're like 2 truculent children. As soon as it didn't go their way, and as soon as there was some pushback against them, the first thing they did was they stomped their feet in the sand. Kyrie goes, well, I'm going to go find the trade because LeBron James wants to play with me. Okay, well, LeBron James you can go figure out a trade. By the way, we don't want Russell Westbrook. Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what to do then. Okay, so then they move on again, and so now they're Kyrie's going to say, I'm going to opt in. And all the Nets fans are like, there's this little bit of a sigh of relief. They're like, we're going to be okay. Both KD and Kyrie are here. We'll figure out the Ben Simmons thing. We still have Joe Harris. We'll figure out the end of the bench where Aldridge and Blake Griffin and Patty Mills. We'll figure out what we're going to do with them. Patty Mills opts out yesterday, which threw a little bit of a monkey wrench into the plan. We don't know what's going on with Goran Dragic. Where is he going to end up next year? So all these questions, and then today. So I'm going to give my opinion, Rick, and you can react. We have Zach Berger from backsportspage.com. He's going to join us in a minute, basketball writer, brand new basketball writer. He just joined the team, and he's going to come on in a minute or two to give his opinion. But, Rick, I'm going to throw this out at you, okay? Now, you and I have known each other since Moses wore short pants. This is just this is how long you and I have known each other as far as sports world. We've been doing this a long time. I always felt when Kevin Durant left the Oklahoma City Thunder, it was a weak move to start. When you're going to go to another team's, you're going to go to another team that's already won a championship and that's competing for a championship every year. It's a bandwagon, and I gained a lot more respect back when Kyrie came to the Nets because he said he wanted to do it here, and he wanted to go to the less scrutinized New York team. Now, the one thing that all the talk shows have not brought up and nobody else has been bringing up is the fact that Kevin Durant has a very fragile ego to the point where he has burner accounts to see what people are saying about him. Okay? So he's still in New York. He's still going to face criticism. He's still going to struggle. The noise may not be as big as it would be if he was playing for the Knicks, but it's still there. You have Kyrie Irving, who thinks the world is flat, disappears for 2 weeks at a time, and doesn't want to play because because of the vaccine mandate and for whatever it is. The Nets, this is what the Nets did. The Nets signed their own death warrant on this one. They caused this problem by giving 2 guys the keys to the castle.
And they did, but they're also going to have 29 teams now calling them about Kevin Durant, basically offering a king's ransom. So as bad as things do look and how people are portraying this like Sean Marks botched these negotiations, all Sean Marks did is what any sensible NBA executive would say. And I'm not going to give a player a max contract that hasn't shown up for half the games and has miscellaneous issues for why he's not showing up for other games. I can't blame Sean Marks one iota for that. So, at the end of the day, I'll let you get on with your thought. The only thing I can blame Sean Marks for from a basketball standpoint is the last offseason before the 2021-22 season. A lot of those free agent additions didn't even finish the season with the Nets. So that was not Sean Marks' finest moment as a GM. Aside from that, his only 2 flaws in my mind were A, caving into Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in the first place, and B, having a bad offseason last year. Aside from that, I mean, the Nets have, like you said, did a deal with the devil, and now they're trying to rein everything back in. And at the first sign of resistance, these two guys take off. So no two players, no one player is bigger than the organization. And that's the message I take away from today. And yeah, does it hurt? Yes. Do your championship odds with all the sports books go down the tubes? Absolutely. But you have building blocks. You even have an opportunity to not even just rebuild, but retool. The Nets could very well be a playoff team this upcoming year, depending if they are able to trade Durant to Phoenix for DeAndre Ayton or another piece, let's say an Anthony Davis from the Lakers, including with a Kyrie and possibly Durant situation. So I think Net fans have to let the chips fall where they may before we rush to judgment and start calling for Sean Marks's job and the sky is falling.
Look, he does not get the blame in this situation.
He
Anyone who thinks he does get the blame obviously does not understand the quick little advertisement dump there for that.
Word from our sponsor.
Word from our sponsor. Let's bring in Zach Berger from BackSportsPage.com, one of the newer writers from BackSportsPage. Zach, what's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Doing okay. So it's a pretty easy day. Nothing really going on. What's going on with you?
I'm just focused on the NBA right now. I'm kind of on my toes, so to speak, as a Sixers fan. I know you guys are both Nets guys, so we'll see what happens here. But
I'm not upset. Like I said, I've lived through Jason Kidd, Richard Jefferson, Vince Carter, Kenyon Martin, all being shipped out of town with not making sense. I thought the James Harden trade last year was the first time that the Nets were able to take advantage of somebody as far as the deal is concerned. The problem is if you're the Nets, you can stay strong and not make a deal. You can tell Durant, we're not doing anything. You can, you signed a 4-year deal. As far as we're concerned, you can be here for 4 more years. We don't care. You can be stuck. As far as are concerned, is you're going to be here. I think what has to happen here is there has to be a little come to Jesus meeting with all parties involved. Hearing what we heard, that the Woj reported that both Durant and Irving have not talked to Nets brass since Irving opted in. So that to me, it says one of two things. One, Durant was not happy about the opt-in, or these two guys communicated with each other and said, look what they're doing. You and I might have to bolt, because if they're not going to respect you and give you the money, what are we doing here? We're not going to be able to do what we wanted to do here, build a legacy. So maybe it's just not supposed to happen here. So why don't you get your money, and then wherever I go, you come with me next year.
If I could jump in, Randy, I just want to say, what kind of way is that to run an organization? How can you, as Sean Marks and Joe Tsai, be running an NBA franchise looking over your shoulder? And look, all these NBA franchises do that with their star players. They are going to consult with them about making big moves or giving them a heads up about trades. But the fact of the matter is, whether it comes from head coaching decisions, whether it's even from a practice day in, day out basis, you're basically operating at a position of weakness and of fear that one of these or both of these guys are going to leave or demand a trade. And that had been the case really for, the better half of the last year. So in my mind, look, you wash your hands of the situation. The Nets are still able, like I said, to retool, not necessarily fully rebuild, because they don't even own draft picks in the next 4 drafts after, thank you very much, the James Harden initial trade from Houston. So they're in a situation right now where even being a lottery team doesn't behoove them anyway, and they can still be competitive. Could they maybe try to be a play-in team for whatever that's worth? Yes, depending how the roster shapes out. But at the end of the day, you kind of, at this point, cut your losses, and you only want people in that building that want to be there at the end of the day.
Well, and that's the one thing that and I'm sorry for jumping in there, Zach. I know you probably had a point you wanted to bring in, but that's the other thing too, is you gave up so much. You gave up so much for James Harden, for that trade. You gave up so much that now you are so handcuffed that you have to, whatever you trade and get for Kyrie, because the Nets, if Kyrie's opting in and you have $34 million on your books, you're not letting him walk away for nothing, and then you have nothing to show for it next year. So you're going to move him. So now, if you're the Nets, you have to find a way now to be competitive. Now, he did this before. If you remember, he got there. He was Billy King's salary hell. He was able to move Brooke Lopez. The team sucked for 3 years, and then they got it together. We're also going to bring in another one of our back sports page writers, Rick. Chris, I apologize for not being able to pronounce your last name. Rick, Rick, this is Chris. He's a new one of our back sports page writers. He's excellent. Chris, what's your take on all this?
I'm actually just seeing this. I heard about it, but honestly, it doesn't surprise me. The stars dictate where they want to go and where they want to be. So the owners either abide or they're going to let them walk. And I don't think Brooklyn wants to let KD walk, even though I know he's under contract for at least another year or so. But it doesn't surprise me. So
he's on a 4-year extension. He signed a 4-year extension right before the start of last year.
Exactly.
So I mean, and look, I want to get all the way around here, but that to me is a bigger point with the NBA, with the collective bargaining agreement. I understand that superstars are going to have a lot of clout and want to dictate where they want to go. But what was the point of him signing a 4-year contract extension? Then all of a sudden, at the drop of a hat, he can demand a trade and go anywhere he wants. So there has to be something collectively bargained where these mega extensions that give the fan base, give ownership, give the front office a peace of mind that they have a guy under contract for the long term, when that's kind of all just smoke and mirrors. At the end of the day, these guys can just pick and choose on an NBA map where they want to go.
I agree with everything you said, but like it's the superstars, unlike the NFL, the superstars will always dictate narratives in the NBA. That's why he was so free and so willing to put this out in Front Street on the eve of free agency. So like I said, I'm not shocked by it. I agree with everything you said, but I'm not shocked by this move, and I won't be shocked if Dame Lillard requests a trade here in the next day or so. I won't be shocked by any of that.
And let me throw something out here. KD threw out his wish list. Not that the Nets have to abide by anything that Kevin Durant wants.
All right.
But he said he would prefer the Phoenix Suns or the Miami Heat. Now let's real quickly take a look at both of those teams. Mm-hmm. The Miami Heat don't have enough. They don't have game-changing pieces. You're going to throw Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Kyle Lowry's contract, because they'll do a buyout for Kyle Lowry's contract. And then maybe like one other piece. If you're not getting Bam back, it doesn't do anything for me.
And Randy, the one thing Zach Lowe pointed out, and it's contractually, the Nets can't have acquired. They already acquired Ben Simmons, who was on a 5-year rookie extension deal, and they can't acquire Bam and have 2 players acquired via trade on the same roster. So that even if Miami wanted to part ways with Bam and they couldn't do it anyway. So like you said, I mean, outside of that, a Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson package, not going to be enough for me. But
it's a much weaker contender, in my opinion. Because, I mean, starting a package with Bam Adebayo, that is a surefire two-way superstar in the future, potentially.
I agree with that 110%. I think Bam is a guy that you really, really look at and you say, this is a guy who we're going to be able to build around.
Right.
Like Jimmy Butler's your star of today, but it's going to transition over to Bam. You have to make sure you have the right young pieces around him. And right. if I'm Miami, I don't give up Tyler Hero. I don't give up Duncan Robinson, because you have 2 sharpshooters right there. You need to have a stud point guard where maybe Donovan Mitchell will come in and keep Bam there. And then all of a sudden you have yourself a real dangerous team with the Miami Heat. Now let's transfer over to the Phoenix Suns as we also welcome in another one of our back sports page writers. Rick is like, oh my God, there's so many of them. Alex Irby, he's out in Chicago. Alex, how are you? Before I jump into my final point with the Phoenix Suns, real quick, let me know what your thoughts on Kevin Durant asking for a trade.
Personally, I really didn't think he would ask for a trade out of Brooklyn. Even though they didn't have the success people thought they would in the playoffs, I thought he would at least give it one more chance, considering Kyrie Irving really just opted in. They still have some decent young players too, and Ben Simmons, Bruce Brown, Nick Claxton. They have the core there to make the playoffs again. It still surprised me, even though you would think he would want to go to at least some kind of championship contender.
Yeah, I think what the scary part for me is, again, the Nets don't have to help him out with anything. They could say, "Oh, you want to go to Phoenix or Miami? We're going to send you to Utah. I hope you have a great day and enjoy living with your 9 wives." That's because that's the way the lifestyle is out in Utah. But with that being said, you have to understand too. Sean Marks did not have to trade James Harden.
Right.
James Harden said, "I really don't want to be here. Can you move me?" He went to Philadelphia and says, "Well, I know you really want to go here. What is the best deal that you can give me? And if it's something that we feel that we like, great. If not, he just won't opt in, and we give up 5 draft picks for you. But we're not going to be held hostage by a player." He did that with James Harden. They called Kyrie Irving's bluff. He opted in, and now Kevin Durant is pissed off, and now both guys haven't talked to Nets management since the opt-in. And the thing with the Phoenix Suns, my thing is, what do you get? Is Ayton enough of a centerpiece of a player to warrant you to send them KD? Because in my eyes, and Rick knows with me that I'm a student of the game with this stuff. I think Ayton is a victim of success due to Chris Paul and the players he has around them. I don't look at him as a guy, as a building block for a team. I look at him as a piece. And I don't want to give up one of the best players in the NBA for a piece of something that we may never even get to see. So I will open that up to whoever wants to respond to that.
I'll take it. So, I mean, again, I think, like, to your point, Randy, I know you loved Andre Drummond, and I did too, and I thought he was as one of the pieces in that Seth Curry, of course, the Ben Simmons, James Harden trade. But Andre Drummond disappeared against the Boston Celtics in that first-round sweep in the playoffs. So I think a guy like DeAndre Ayton, what does he average? Almost 18 points a game, 11 rebounds. I mean, he is going to be that double-double machine. Is he going to be – could he be a Robin? Absolutely. I think he could be a second star. You already have Ben Simmons, question mark about where his head is at. All the reports are that he is gearing up, was expected at training camp after back surgery. When I see it, I'll believe it sort of scenario. So they're even with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving now, all those question marks, you even still have more question marks related to Ben Simmons on this roster. So as far as what you're saying, Randy, I don't know what other player or players would be available that would have the upside that a guy like Ayton would have at his age, 24 years old. A lot of growth potential there. And the Nets have never really had that dominant big man in the center since Brook Lopez, of course, was traded, you alluded to, and Sean Marks starting up that rebuild and coming out the other side. So I frankly would like to see them go back to that classic model of a point guard, and that being Ben Simmons, assuming he plays, and an Ayton at the 5, and kind of build from there and fill in the pieces. Like a Royce O'Neal, who supposedly is coming over for a first-round pick. I guess Sean Marks didn't get the memo that Kevin Durant was demanding a trade, because that's not the kind of trade you make when you're trading your 2 superstar players, is trade a future first-round pick for Royce O'Neal.
Well, yeah. So go ahead, please. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, yeah. I agree with a little bit what you said. I definitely agree with what Randy said. Ayton's going to thrive because he's playing with the best floor general in basketball, so the setup game is going to be a lot easier for him. And throwing Andre Drummond and DeAndre Ayton are 2 different players. Ayton actually has a nice touch. He can actually finish around the basket. He can shoot a little bit. Ayton, he doesn't even belong in the league anymore, in my opinion. Can't guard the pick and roll. He's not a great rebounder. The floor is too space for him. So it's just, this modern day NBA is not good for Andre Drummond. But Ayton, I don't think Ayton can be the second best player on the championship team. I don't even think he has the right mentality for it yet. Chris Paul helped him a lot. He leaves a point guard like that to go play with a Ben Simmons, a guy with the weakest mentality, I think, in the league right now. You can go get your money, but I don't think it's going to equate to success for him like he got in Phoenix, because he was playing with such a floor general, Chris Paul. Go ahead, Randy.
And not only that, from a Nets perspective, what do you do now? Also, like, what do you do? You don't want to bring back. You're not going to want to bring back a bunch of veterans. And what I mean by veterans, I'm like, not bringing back Blake Griffin, Patty Mills, Goran Dragic, Andre Drummond. You're not going to bring those guys back in free agency if you decide you want to go young. So you take that much. So I think that the next move that Sean Marks make is going to be the most critical, because if you decide you want to trade Kevin Durant and you're taking off that big chunk of salary, You have to go out there and really decide and go young. I don't think there's anything wrong with the way the Oklahoma City Thunder did things right now, building around young draft picks, and the way they did it when they had Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden and Serge Ibaka in the first time around. Having your homegrown guys and then decide when you want to pay them, there is nothing wrong with that. You know, they had to make a tough decision at OKC when it came down to paying either Serge Ibaka or James Harden. And at that time, I felt they made the right decision because there's a lot of guys in the league who can do what James Harden does. There's a lot of guys in this league who can score. No.
Back then, I don't know about that, Randy.
No, Chris, let me finish my point. And what I mean by that is not be the star, because James Harden has a presence. James Harden is a brand, and he is a star. He helps draw tickets. What I mean is, at that time, what he was doing in Oklahoma City with being a guy off the bench who's able to score in bunches, there's a lot of guys in the NBA who can do that, who can score in bunches. May not have the charisma that James Harden did and does now, but there are guys who can fill up the basket and score 20 points at a time. Now, James Harden evolved into a household name superstar while I was a member of the Houston Rockets. He was not with that in OKC, and he did not get an extension because of that, because Serge Ibaka at that time brought more things to the table than James Harden did. I'm not saying if right now, you can't compare the two. James Harden is a much bigger superstar. He brings much more to the NBA. He brings eyes to the TV. I'm not denying that. What I'm saying is, at that point in OKC, they had to make a choice, and they paid Serge Ibaka because at that time there was a bunch of guys in the NBA who was able to do what James Harden was able to do.
Well, I agree with that. I think they did make the right decision. Obviously, well, you have two perimeter players in KD and Russ, so why keep a third? We can go with a versatile big man like Ibaka who can stretch. He wasn't really shooting the three back then, but he was defending the rim. He was solid on pick and roll defense. He was there before Steven Adams got there. He was kind of their big. So his versatility, I keep James. No, I agree with that part. But James was able to evolve because I forgot the coach's name that was there when he got to Houston.
I think it was Mikhail.
Mikhail was able to put the ball in his hand. Yeah, take his game to the next level. So, but I do think Sam Presti made the right decision in keeping Ibaka. But James was able to evolve because Houston gave him the keys. He was never going to get the keys in Oklahoma City, ever.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. You know, that's what I meant. I wasn't sitting there saying right now Serge Ibaka is a much better player and they made the right decision. At that time, at that moment, they had to make a decision, and they made that decision. And at the time, it was right for that franchise. So I know I was cutting somebody off.
That's all right.
Rick, I asked this question for you. So what's the next step for Brooklyn? Do you try to abide by what KD's asking for, or do you say, hey, if we can call Minnesota and get Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns for KD, I hope you enjoy Minnesota, KD.
Right. Or a Zion Williamson from New Orleans. I mean, at this point, you know, that bridge has already been burned. Sean Marks is trying to establish a player-friendly culture. You know, he doesn't want basically players on the way out speaking badly about the organization. Even with James Harden, like you mentioned, they accommodated his trade request. They tried as best they could to facilitate that. So I think the Nets are trying to play nice, so to speak. But at the end of the day, if you're a Nets fan, you want the best return for the trade. But for the front office side of things, they also want the optics to look good so that it's not that they're, like you said, dumping him. Well, you know, if you would have said 2 years ago, dumping him in Minnesota, I don't necessarily think, I mean, if you send him to Minnesota with the way that team was pushing Memphis to the brink in that first round series, that could be a game changer there. I mean, is Minnesota going to be the sexy market that Durant's going to want to be in? Maybe not, but at the same time, the media isn't what it is there as what it is in Brooklyn, or certainly when he was with Golden State with the Warriors. So maybe he can kind of get lost a little bit. But at the end of the day, I mean, the NBA is not a regional sport like baseball. I mean, all of these players, whether they're, you know, one of the 30 teams, they're going to be covered on a national basis. So no matter how much Kyrie and or KD want to kind of find a place where they can kind of hide from the media, that's not going to happen. The spotlight's going to be right on them. And wherever KD goes, it's going to be championship or bust expectations. And like you talked about at the start of the show, Randy, you lost a lot of respect for Kevin Durant when he ultimately wanted to sign with the Golden State Warriors, and then now, of course, jumping ship on the Brooklyn Nets for the new the hot girl on the block, so to speak. So if he doesn't deliver this now second, third, fourth time around a championship when he didn't miss the boat with Brooklyn, that also I think is going to taint his legacy. So for me, I think the best fit. I probably like Ayton more than I like most of the packages, unless you're talking about a Zion Williamson or somebody of that caliber, and there's still opportunity to grow and develop. And I still think that, again, could he be a Robin to a championship team today? No, but if in 2 or 3 years of developing and Ben Simmons or other pieces around him, he could be one of those key members on that team. So I think the Suns make the most sense for KD and the Nets, and I think that's ultimately where he lands. I just want to say really quickly, if I'm anticipating, we kind of got a little glimpse of the market, the sign and trade market for Kyrie Irving was really pretty much the Los Angeles Lakers. And one of the teams I think that could be a dark horse, of course, a former net player and head coach in Jason Kidd, that Kyrie Irving grew up. That was the reason why he became a Net fan, not only growing up in New Jersey, but loved Jason Kidd, was going to deliver a championship to the now Brooklyn Nets. We know how that went. But I could see a potential trade for, if you're trading Kyrie, which everyone's expects is going to happen, you could potentially get Spencer Dinwiddie and some other assets back. And I think that would go a small way in maybe at least making this fan base start taking their finger off the fire Sean Marks button, at least for now.
And it's funny, guys, before anybody else jumps in, I'm going to throw 2 questions up on the board here. It's funny you say that. Yes, the Mavericks are waiting to get through this Jalen Brunson thing. They are predicted to lose Jalen Brunson to the Knicks, but if they don't retain him, they're going to go hard after Kyrie Irving, and that came down a little while ago. The other team that might also take a shot, and I sent a text over to him. Rick, you know him well. I sent the text over to Lawrence Frank a few minutes ago while we were on the air, and I said, Lawrence, you don't have to answer this, and I don't expect you to. Any interest in KD? And he gave me that little emoji with the eyes up like this type of thing. If you have the opportunity to get away from that injury-plagued Kawhi Leonard contract and bring in Kevin Durant to the Clippers after you get John Wall and have Paul George, I think that looks very attractive if you're a Clipper fan. Not many of those out there, but I'm just throwing that, just saying that, that's another thing. If you're the Nets, you're also forgetting the number one thing, which is already dinged up a little bit. Your image is already dinged up. But if you're trading 2 of the most popular jersey selling players in the NBA, you got to bring somebody back who's going to be able to help market this team and help bring in the same type of revenue that those 2 guys brought in. And that's something that nobody's talking about. Real quick, I want to throw these 2 questions out there, and feel guys, whoever wants to answer it, please feel free. What happens to Steve Nash in this whole entire situation? His coaching got questioned throughout the playoffs, especially by me. Rick knows I was screaming from the rooftop, how are you not playing Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge during that Celtics series? I just didn't understand it. We are going to now learn what kind of coach Steve Nash is. Any of you guys want to jump in and touch this topic?
Well, I think he was just kind of thrown in there from the start, right? This is not a guy with head coaching experience prior. And you say, here's Kevin Durant, here's Kyrie Irving, get us a championship. And, Frank Vogel got it done, but that's still a tall task. You got to get a whole roster together. You got to be looking at team chemistry, which obviously was not good. And, everything else that a head coach has to worry about, other than just, here's the talent, and we expect you to do well. Whether they give him another season or not will be interesting, because I think he would even have the chance to prove himself with a weaker roster next year if they still, compete with Kyrie and maybe not, but, Kyrie and question mark star. Maybe Ben Simmons, we'll see. Haven't seen him play in forever, but I don't know. Honestly, I think I would like to see Sean Marks give Steve Nash one more season, especially with a retooled roster.
And it's funny, I'll let somebody else in a minute, but it's funny, Randy, because you mentioned, and we talked about how Kyrie and KD are joined at the hip. I would argue that Sean Marks and Steve Nash are joined at the hip. I mean, they were former teammates. They were good buddies even before Sean Marks was in San Antonio's front office, during their playing days. And I absolved Sean Marks of a lot of the blame, probably more than 99% of NBA Twitter, for how this situation unfolded, because, again, they did a deal with the devil, and now they got to pay the piper. Luckily, they're going to have 29 teams calling to give a king's ransom for Kevin Durant, and probably get something of value back for Kyrie Irving. But the one thing I will attribute some blame to Sean Marks for is really just handing the keys to the bus to Steve Nash. When you mentioned it, I mean, what credentials does he have other than consulting for the Warriors? And during the time when he's consulting, I mean, they won just as many championships as they did before he got there and after. So I mean, he really had very little impact there, other than a familiarity with Kevin Durant when he was there. So again, I think I would like to see how Steve Nash handles a younger roster with these three rookies and Cam Thomas and Kessler Edwards and Day'Ron Sharpe, and even add David Duke Jr. to that mix. So the most exciting portion of that Nets season, it was filled with drama, littered with dysfunction, constantly about, is Kyrie coming back? Is he playing part-time, full-time? The most enjoyable from a fan perspective, just to sit down and watch the game, and when the Nets were playing their best, was actually with KD and all the rookies out there playing free, learning the game, and it looked like they were taking more to Steve Nash's coaching style. And then when you got Kyrie back in the mix, and of course Harden and Kyrie were clashing, so I kind of want to give Steve Nash at least the season to see how he can handle a young group of guys that maybe have a little more coachability than Kyrie and KD, who are basketball savants. Their basketball talent is undeniable. They're also not the most coachable guys in the world either.
No, definitely. Again, the reason why they picked Steve Nash to be their coach is because they wanted to have it where they had no accountability. And Steve Nash gave them no accountability. And what happens when that happened? When it happened this past season, it ended up being a disaster, an absolute disaster. Rick, you and I have broken down that Celtics series ad nauseum, and I told you all the things that I didn't like between when your two top guys are struggling in game two and they can't even get their hands on the ball. Why not bring LaMarcus Aldridge in, who can score in bunches from the free throw line down to help take pressure off of Kyrie and KD, and makes the Celtics guard somebody else scoring, to not picking up Marcus Smart on full court pressure and waiting for him till he got to the 3-point line, to not pressuring Jason Tatum even getting the ball. All those things, just those three things there, could have made a major difference in the Nets not getting swept out of the first round of the playoffs. The second question here, and Zach brought it up. What happens to Ben Simmons? Do you try and ship him out of here? Is there a market for him? Is there anyone who can take him? Like, what do you do? Chris, you're shaking your head. Talk to me.
I mean, I know I've known you that long, Randy, but my stance has been the same on Ben since probably after his rookie year, when I don't see the growth. I mean, to me personally, I don't feel he wants to be great. So I'm a Kobe guy. So I don't see him putting work in, and then for him to sit out the whole season and just, that's weak to me. I don't like stuff like that. I wouldn't be able to play with the guy if I was playing back in the day, but it's just, I'm not shocked by it. Guys get their money nowadays, and now they're comfortable. You seen him with the big chains around his neck and all the money, but he's not helping any of his teammates out there on the court. But I don't think he don't want to be great. So, well,
not only that, but the man who we're going to add to the call right now, he and I both said, it's one thing for you not to play. We would never downgrade mental health or an injury, but don't sit on the bench looking like a Christmas tree. And with that being said, we're going to welcome in my partner for the Hardwood Huddle, which we will be live tomorrow morning with one of the Nets beat writers. Let's welcome back in Mr. Bill Ingram. He is my co-host from the Hardwood Huddle. Mr. Ingram, I know you have a lot to say, and to show you that Bill was a little out of touch what's going on, I said, do you want to go on right now? He goes, why? What's going on? I said, well, KD. He goes, well, what about KD? I said, he just requested a trade. He goes, crap.
Well, I was in a movie, so I hadn't been following all the drama, but it's interesting that KD waited until Kyrie had been re-inked for one more year. What does that say? I mean, you wanted him. They came as a pair.
Mm-hmm.
And now and maybe you guys have already covered this, but now you're saying, okay, now the guy I insisted on playing with, you could have kept Spencer Dinwiddie, for God's sake, who plays every game and plays hard, and he's clutch.
You could still get him back, Bill, if you trade Kyrie to Dallas.
What? Oh my God. I don't
Yeah,
know. Is Dallas that
Bill
stupid?
just got out of the movie, so he's catching up with everything that's going on right now. So, Bill, this news just broke a few minutes ago from Woj and Brian Windhorst as well. Assuming that the Mavericks lose out on Jalen Brunson, it's about 99% sure that he's going to sign with the Knicks.
He's going to get overpaid. Yeah.
Yeah, Brunson during any other free agency year is a 17 to 18 million dollar player in today's NBA, but this because the level of free agents is so low this year, he's going to get about 25 million from the Knicks. So, which is
Same.
beyond, and good for him. Good for him for
Yeah.
getting it. But
Yep,
from
for sure.
assuming he goes to New York, it has been reported that the Mavericks are going to push very hard to try and get Kyrie Irving in the same backcourt, Luka Doncic. I don't know if there's enough basketballs.
Why?
Bill, you might want to go into a double feature so you can see.
Well, there's not two movies I want to see. I've already seen Top Gun. Jurassic Park's getting horrible reviews, and what else is there? Minions doesn't come out till tomorrow. So, no, I think I think that I don't know why Kyrie Irving still has so much stock value in the NBA. I mean, 5 years ago, okay, but my God, the world is flat. He's afraid of vaccines. Like, what's the next social issue that's going to sideline him? It's like Kawhi. You have these. It's almost like the modern, what we call superstars, represents the U.S. workforce right now. You got every business in the country needs workers, and no one wants to show up to work. People will take the job and then not show up. And this is what we have even with Kevin Durant. You have it with Kyrie Irving. You have it with Kawhi Leonard. It's like, well, yes, I'm getting paid $400 million to play basketball, but I'm just not sure I feel good today. And like, I just don't know. And like, I don't know if the world's the right shape. And like, I'm just not sure. Like, what the? I've said this a million times, as Randy knows on the show. I grew up in an era where Dominique Wilkins got carried off the court in a stretcher in the first half of a game and came back and scored 25 points in the second half. We had him on the Hardwood Huddle last year, and we talked about that game. Like, what happened to playing, wanting to play basketball, wanting to win ahead of whatever other thing comes into your head?
Well, I just said before, wouldn't it be amazing if they traded him to like Minnesota for Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns, and he just gets stuck out in Minnesota by himself? I would absolutely love that. I would absolutely love it. Bill, you and I are going to be on tomorrow morning, and so we're going to have a lot more with this because obviously a lot more will unfold in the next 24 to 48 hours. I can't see, and I'll open this up to all of you guys. I can't see Sean Marks letting this linger between keeping both of those guys. You can't let them back in the building at this point. So my question to you is, I'll go around one by one. Where do you think each one of these guys goes? Bill, you just said you didn't get to hear me say about Ayton before. I think he's a product of having good players around him. And I think averaging 18 a game is a product of him having guys like Devin Booker and Chris Paul with him. I would not make him a centerpiece of a deal for a guy at the caliber of either Kyrie or KD. So I'm going to go around, and I'm going to start with, since Zach was the first one on with us. Zach, where do you think each one goes, and what kind of package do you think the Nets can get for either one of them?
Well, I want to start by talking about, I'm from Philadelphia. Watching the Ben Simmons saga over the last 5-6 years has been an absolute nightmare. And the pairing with Joel Embiid, if you want to call Ayton any kind of baby Embiid or floor stretching modern NBA 5, I just think is atrocious. I mean, Ben has not shown the ability to stretch the floor really, like, at all. He can't shoot. He doesn't want to play basketball. And I think you have to put more offensive creators around him if he even plays. DeAndre Ayton isn't necessarily that offensive creator that's going to take the burden off of Ben so that he can go hide in the corner and pass the ball. With that being said, I think the Durant package has to start with a superstar, another good young player, and a third piece that's not on a big contract, and 3 first-round picks. For example, Sixers would be Maxey, Harris, Thibault, 3 first-round picks. Suns would probably be Ayton, Bridges, maybe Cam Johnson, and 3 first-round picks. I don't really know what the package they're talking about now is. But then I gotta have faith in the GMs of the NBA that they won't be willing to give up any key assets for Kyrie Irving right now. So
Coke and fries, maybe Big Mac. I don't know, maybe.
I don't know. I'm thinking Arby's. Honestly, he is just not worth much these days. And if you're not going to play basketball and you're constantly going to be, whining about whatever organization you're with, no one's going to want you.
Yeah, it's true. Zach, excellent point. Let's go to Alex. What do you got for me, buddy?
In terms of the Kevin Durant trade, I would honestly, just looking at all the choices, I would go with the Phoenix Suns, just because they not only give really Kevin Durant the best chance to win, but I mean, if you look at what the Phoenix Suns have in terms of players, in terms of draft capital, things like that, the Suns do have every one of their first-round picks leading up to 2028. And I mean, you just saw the trade with Dejounte Murray. He was traded away for 3 first-round picks, a pick swap, and Danilo Gallinari. You've seen picks. I mean, DeMar DeRozan was traded away for a couple first-rounders, a couple players too. They're going to want to ask, especially, they're going to have to go about 2 paths. They're really going to have to ask themselves if they can really make the playoffs again, if they can really trade with a playoff contender for a couple veterans and actually make the playoffs again, or if they're going to actually want to, nosedive again into an actual rebuild. If they're going to do that, they're going to want to have to get a huge plethora of draft capital, maybe I would say 4 at least first-round picks, and some actual players that they can actually build around for the next couple of years. Personally, kind of like what you mentioned, Zach, I would think potentially Mikal Bridges would do the best in terms of defense, just because of how good he is on the defensive end. And he seems like someone who would really fit with the Brooklyn Nets for a little while. Cam Johnson, I mean, he's a decent shooter, but I don't know how long he can really keep him around there. DeAndre Ayton, personally, I wouldn't want to trade him if I were the Phoenix Suns, obviously. I mean, he did, obviously, as you guys said, benefit off having the play of Devin Booker, Chris Paul, and a lot of great role players around him. But he is certainly, I mean, especially if you watched him play in Arizona, he did justify getting that top 5 pick. So if you are going to compete for a championship on the Phoenix Suns, you're going to have to keep Devin Booker, Chris Paul, and potentially DeAndre Ayton too. So if you want something that really benefits both sides, I would think Kevin Durant would, potentially go to the Phoenix Suns. Kyrie Irving, I'm not really sure about. The Dallas Mavericks would be a fun option. Just seeing him and Luka Doncic in the same backcourt.
Don't tell that to Maverick fans.
Only for about 50 games.
Right? Yeah. Okay. He is. I mean, he is still a world champion. He does still have the talent to be one of the best point guards in the NBA, best scoring point guards in the NBA. So it would potentially be fun to see them in the same backcourt, especially, I mean, Spencer Dinwiddie's making $18 million, Tim Hardaway 19. You could potentially try matching up the salaries with those. Phoenix, it would be a bit harder to match up the salary. I don't think it really matters in the offseason, but it would potentially be harder to match up the salaries with those. I think Mikal Bridges making $21 million in 2022. But honestly, I would, in my mind, think that Kevin Durant should become a Phoenix Sun if they really want to benefit both sides.
I just literally, by the way, had this mental picture of Kyrie Irving bull riding in Texas. I don't know why.
At Gillies.
All of a sudden, it's game time. Where's Kyrie? All of a sudden, you see a local rodeo on TV, and there's Kyrie. just going that way. Chris, what do you got for me, brother?
I mean, I hear what everybody is saying, but wherever KD goes, it's going to be tough because he's going to make whatever team he goes to weaker because they're going to have to give up so much to get him. Phoenix sounds good, but you're going to give up their best perimeter defender, their big man, and then probably like you said, Cam Johnson. So I really don't see it, honestly. I don't know where he can go and that team be even better because they're gonna have to give up so much. It's not gonna be enough just to give up picks. You're gonna have to give up assets and young assets. So I really don't know where he can go right now. Kyrie, I don't see him going to Dallas. The ball's gonna be in 77's hands, and it should be. And Kyrie's doesn't play well off the ball, and he doesn't play deep. So I don't see him and Kyrie playing together. Spencer Dinwiddie's a little different because he can play off the ball. He's used to it.
Yep.
So that's a little different. But as far as KD, man, I don't. Me personally, I really don't see it because you're gonna have to give up too much to get him. You send him to Phoenix. Phoenix is not going to be as good as they were because they've given up so much. They don't have a big man. I don't think they're going to want to. Coach Monty is not going to play through JaVale. I don't think JaVale's going to want to be their starter. No. So you're going to give up your best perimeter defender. CP's getting older. He can't defend like that. Book's not a great defender. You're going to ask KD to play defense on the other team's best perimeter player. I really don't know, honestly, right now, guys. It's up in the air for me. But I wouldn't give him away for just anything either. So Sean Marks, that's why he gets paid the big bucks. He's got to figure this out.
I agree with that totally. I'm going to throw something out there that maybe we haven't talked about, and Bill would love this because if Sean Marks was able to pull this off, it would have to be a 3-team deal for those guys to learn to lean to the land there. Wouldn't it be interesting if this was, the Spurs trading Devontae Murray was to open up salary? Because maybe something was going on that maybe the news broke today, but a lot of this stuff was just, talked about ahead of time. Wouldn't it be interesting if Pop ended up getting his hands on Kyrie and KD? Bill, I would love to hear your opinion on that possibility of both of those guys ending up in San Antonio.
I'll say this, and then I got to run. If you put Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant under Greg Popovich's dome, they're going to have to play, and they're going to have to play hard, and they both know it. They're not strangers to Popovich. They've both played with Team USA, where Pop has been a regular coach. And perhaps that's the situation where they can realize the potential that they thought they had in Brooklyn. The thing I don't understand, I didn't understand the DeJounte Murray trade because you home grew this kid, you drafted him, you turned him into an all-star, now he's gone. Right. What you're talking about would make sense of that deal. And as we've talked about many times on this show, I firmly believe Greg Popovich is the greatest NBA basketball coach of all time. And it's an interesting thing to think about. I like the points that I've heard you guys make that I completely agree with. You're not going to gut your team to bring in Kyrie Irving or Kevin Durant because unless, Popovich might be different. Maybe they would show up and play 75 plus games for him. Neither of these guys is going to, what we've seen from them the last few years, they're not going to play through injuries. They're not going to play hard. They're going to wait until the playoffs start and then think they can just turn it on. And what we saw from the Nets this time was they thought they could just play hero ball one-on-one, and both of them scored 35 points each, and they lost. Mm-hmm. That doesn't work. No. I do like the idea of San Antonio. I like it because both of these guys know what you're going to get from Greg Popovich. You're going to get his shoe up your ass if you're not playing hard, and you're not going to sit on the sideline or you're going to be gone. So if they would agree to that and understanding what you've got there, that would be intriguing to me. I think the only place that makes sense for KD is Phoenix, and I think that because of the Ayton situation. I don't think Ayton is a max player, personally. I really don't. I think, as we've talked about, you've made him with the team around him. It's not a league where the center makes himself anymore. But does that mean a deal doesn't get done? No, of course not. Many bad deals happen around the NBA every year. And as far as Kyrie to Dallas, oh my God, really? They've got plenty. They've got plenty of shooters. They've got plenty. Look, Tim Hardaway Jr. is going to be back. You traded for the replacement when they dealt KP for Dinwiddie. You brought in the replacement for Jalen Brunson. You don't need him. He's extra. Let him go. They got the rebounding they need. Maybe they can convince Chris to play some defense. The Rockets certainly couldn't do that. But then again, he was brought in to compete for a championship with James Harden, and the rest of the team was shipped out, and he was left holding the ball. Maybe in this situation, Christian Wood plays defense and rebounds, in which case Dallas has – that's what they need. They don't need anything else. Don't do something stupid and bring in a guy that's only going to play 50 games, and then he's not sure what shape the world is, or there's some other social issue, and oh my God, now he can't play. No, that's too much drama. The Mavs were in the Western Conference Finals. You don't make a huge team destroying move. I feel the same way about Phoenix when you're that close to being in the finals. So definitely going to be fun to kick around tomorrow, Randy. Guys, good to be on with you. I jumped on just for a second because we were walking out of a movie, and now I gotta go back and get ready for a rehearsal with my daughter. But wow, interesting news. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Bill, we'll see you tomorrow. Hardwood Huddle tomorrow morning at Back Sports Page Sports Network. All right.
Sounds good.
All right.
And guys, and Rick will tell you when Bill and I are going, we go. Rick, you're the last one. What's going on with Kyrie and KD? Where do they end up?
I mean, again, I'll stick to my guns. I think ultimately it makes the most sense for KD. It doesn't, from the Suns' standpoint, it doesn't make the most sense for them because they're going to have to gut their team. It's like we talked about, Bridges, Thomas. It starts at Ayton and multiple first-round picks. I think that's what gets it done. And KD is happy. He's got the top team on his list. This, that in Miami were on his wish list. So he's out there in the Valley of the Sun with Chris Paul. They've always been close going back to their the Team USA days and all that kind of stuff. So I think that makes the most sense from all ends, except maybe Phoenix's. And then Kyrie is the mystery box. I don't know for the Nets return. I would like to see Dinwiddie come back and some other assets from Dallas and let Kyrie figure it out. I tend to disagree. I think he does play well off the ball. What worked so well when the Nets made the trade for James Harden, because don't forget that first year when KD and Kyrie were playing together, the first half of the season, they were good. Were they dominant? Not necessarily. It was Harden that ultimately took on that role as the facilitator, the distributor. Was he in great shape? No, but he fit the pieces of the puzzle fit there. So I think that Kyrie would find a way, even though Bill would argue they have enough shooting in Dallas, they're probably going to have to trade some of those shooters in order, to make it work with Kyrie. I think ultimately he lands in Dallas, and but the dark horse, and not really the dark horse, the team that he probably, if you ask Kyrie, wants to play for, he wants to reunite with LeBron and go out to LA and try to dethrone Steph Curry. But ultimately, I think it's Dallas for Kyrie, and I think it's Phoenix for KD.
All right, I'll give my final opinion. I had to throw the San Antonio idea out to Bill because I know he would love it so much. And Chris shakes his head at me because I even brought that up. But look, here's my prediction. I think the Nets are going to do what's best for the Nets. It's nice that I think it's really nice that the Nets or that these guys are asking to be traded at certain places. Sean Marks is going to look what's best for the Nets. If they can package something between Rudy Gobert and bringing Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert to the Nets for a deal for Kevin Durant, they're going to do that. They're going to look out for what's best for them. They don't have to do these guys any favors. They can make these guys play out their contracts this year if he really wants to. I think obviously if you really, really, really want to find a home for these guys, I would honestly try and make a deal with some of these younger teams. Look, if I'm the Nets, I would possibly talk to Memphis if a team is going to try and give up pieces. Obviously, you're not getting Morant, but you can look at guys like Bane. You can look at some of these other young pieces that they have and get 3 or 4 of those guys and then some draft picks, and you could still compete because you're going to have a lot of young talent. It's not going to be the sexy names like Durant and Kyrie. And as far as Kyrie's concerned, look, you can ship him wherever you want to. If you want to you're not going to send him out to Detroit. You're not going to send him out to Milwaukee. Though I think the Milwaukee Bucks are looking for a little bit of a makeover right now because after you have Giannis, you have Middleton and Drew Holiday, and there's a lot of other guys that are in the league that can do what they do. Giannis having a real secure number 2 would be something to take a look at. Maybe they might want to get into the Kyrie Irving conversation as well. They just don't have the assets for it right now. So, guys, it's going to get real interesting in the next 24, 48 hours. I can't see Sean Marks letting this linger, especially during free agency. I can't see this going into August with both of these guys still in Brooklyn. So I wanted to give you guys a little taste of coming on the show. Obviously, I ramble on and I go. That's why it's called Off Topic. And we just make these things happen. Tomorrow morning, I'll be back with Bill Ingram for the Hardwood Huddle. That is the flagship basketball show. Rick Laughlin and I host the Nets Insider. We didn't go that route today because I was going to try and maybe jump into a little football with Rick, but I guess that didn't happen. Rick, I believe you have a little something you want to plug. Go right ahead.
Oh, sure. I have about 100 copies sitting behind me, but this is the book, the History of the Nets from Teaneck to Brooklyn. And who knows, they might be in Timbuktu by this time next year if nobody's showing up at Barclays Center. But no, in all seriousness, the big takeaway from today's trade, I just covered 55 plus years of history of the team. The organization was there before KD and Kevin, KD and Kyrie arrived, and they will survive throughout this whole debacle that's going on right now. So I think if you're a Net fan, you have to trust in Sean Marks. He didn't have a great offseason this past year, but he's due to reload this team and retool them. So at least you won't have the box office attractions like you did at Barclays Center with KD and Kyrie, but you'll have a watchable product on the court. That's assuming Ben Simmons plays. When I see it, I believe it.
All right. Got Chris, Zach, Alex, thank you guys for coming on. Rick Lachlan from the Nets Insider, thank you for coming on. I'm Randy Zelli at backsportspage.com, and we will see you tomorrow morning for Off Topic.
Thank you, guys.
Take care, guys.
All right.
Yeah.